with a number.
I'm a wee bit short. Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Beautiful. I would like to begin on behalf of Sisters in Crime Australia by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation on whose traditional lands we gather today. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty of this land was never ceded. And we have a really important opportunity later this year in the context of the referendum to make some amends about that. And I encourage you all to visit your local public library.
Yay!
And they will have information, neutral information, to explain what the referendum is actually about and what the implications are of your vote. My name's Angela Savage. I have the great honour of being the CEO of Public Libraries Victoria. As you can see, I'm on brand tonight. And I'm also a member of the Sisters in Crime and have been for a very long time, Carmel.
1998.
1998, yes. My maths is too bad. I think that's 25 years, isn't it? It's my silver anniversary. My Sisters in Crime membership. But tonight we're actually here. Sisters in Crime Australia has joined forces with the beautiful Melbourne Athenaeum Library. I thought as I was walking up the stairs just how much I love being here. And we're here to launch the Sisters in Crime 30th Scarlet Stiletto Awards, the short story competition, and to present 2 Body in the Library short story readings, which I'm really looking forward to. Now, the Scarlet Stiletto Awards are a milestone for Australian crime fiction. They've springboarded the careers of many writers, my own included. To date, 4,322 stories have been entered, with 33, soon to be 34, Scarlet Stiletto Award winners, including category winners, going on to have novels published. Now, let's just think about that for a minute. So the Scarlet Stilettos have been going for 30 years. 34 women have had novels published as a result of their engagement with these awards. I don't know of any other writing program anywhere with any amount of money thrown at it that has outcomes like that. So my hat is off to the sisters. Congratulations. You are a big bomb. All right. Now, like so many Sisters in Crime, Crime's best ideas, the Scarlet Stilettos sprang from a well-lubricated meeting in St Kilda in 1994. I know, it's a shock, right? When the conveners debated how they could unearth the female criminal talent they were convinced was loitering with intent. Once a competition was settled on, it didn't take long to settle on a name. Scarlet Stiletto, feminist play on the traditions of the genre. The stiletto is, of course, both a weapon and a shoe worn by women, and indeed some men. And of course, the colour scarlet has a special association for us women. And of course, the sisters were right. Talent is loitering everywhere, sometimes in the most unlikely places. I was talking with a friend ahead of tonight saying, oh, you know, the Scarlet Stilettos have launched some amazing careers, like, you know, Kate Kennedy, and they went, the Kate Kennedy, and I'm like, yeah. Tara Moss, the Tara Moss, I'm like, yeah. Also, the Aoife Clifford, the Ali Marnie, the Anna Stroke, and a whole lot of others. The success and longevity of the awards have been hugely dependent on the generosity of Australian publishers, booksellers, the film and television industry, authors, and other parties. And one of the other parties is, of course, the Melbourne Athenaeum Library, that has sponsored the Body in the Library category of Scarlet Stiletto Awards since 2012 by offering what is now a very generous $1,250 prize to the winner and $750 to the runner-up. This partnership has seen, thank you, and the partnership's seen the number of entries grow each year. Clearly a prize worth killing for. I know I'm wearing libraries change lives, but also sometimes libraries end lives in this context. As you may know, the Body in the Library Award honours Agatha Christie, the title of her pioneering 1942 Miss Marple novel. Agatha's foreword is famous, and to read it we have Sophie Arnold, the business manager at Melbourne Athenaeum Inc., an experienced media and communications specialist who has also managed several non-for-profit organisations as well as being media advisor to Victorian government ministers, and then Premier, the wonderful late Joan Kerner. Please, a warm, embarrassingly warm welcome for Sophie.
Thank you. So there are certain cliches belonging to certain types of fiction. The bold, bad baronet for melodrama, the body in the library for the detective story. For several years I treasured up the possibility of a suitable variation on a well-known theme. I laid down for myself certain conditions. The library in question must be a highly orthodox and conventional library. The body, on the other hand, must be a wildly improbable and highly sensational body. Such were the terms of the problem, but for some years they remained as such, represented only by a few lines of writing in an exercise book. Then, staying one summer for a few days at a fashionable hotel by the seaside, I observed a family at one of the tables in the dining room. An elderly man in a wheelchair, and with him was a family party of a younger generation. Fortunately, they left the next day so that my imagination could get to work unhampered by any kind of knowledge. When people ask, do you put real people in your books? The answer is that for me, it is quite impossible to write about anyone I know or have ever spoken to, or indeed have even heard about. For some reason, it kills them for me stone dead. But I can take a lay figure and endow it with qualities and imaginings of my own. So, an elderly crippled man became the pivot of the story. Colonel and Mrs. Bantry, those old cronies of my Miss Marple, had just the right kind of library. In the matter of a cookery recipe, add the following ingredients: a tennis pro, a young dancer, an artist, a girl guide, and a dance hostess, etc., and serve up a la Miss Marple.
Not looking down. Yeah, natural. One more. Let's put it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. That was great. I love getting that context too. And now I'd like to welcome Susanna Lobez, an actor turned barista turned broadcaster turned true crime writer. I'm dizzy just thinking about it. With her co-writer and fellow lapsed lawyer James Morton, Susanna has written 12 true crime books, including the best-selling Gangland series Kings of Stings and a compendium of Australian crime dangerous to know. Susanna is going to read The Surrogate, Jem Tyler Moore's winning story from 2022. Jem's here tonight. Stand over and take the bow, Jem. Jem Tyler Moore's short stories are published in Meanjin, Overland, We'll Stand in That Place and Other Stories by Margaret River Press, and Other Places, That Place and Other Places. She has been shortlisted for the S.D. Harvey, Alan Marshall, Right Around the Murray and Stuart Haddo short story prizes, and longlisted for both the 2021 Bath Novel Prize and the 2020 Kill Your Darlings Unpublished Manuscript Award. In 2018, Jem was awarded a Wheeler Centre Hot Desk Fellowship. Over to you, Susanna, to read Jem's story, The Surrogate.
Jem, I love it. The Surrogate by Jem Taylor Miller. I'm taller. Teddy, help!
Not the youngest anymore, Susanna.
The Surrogate by, yeah, just a bit high, honey. Yeah. Said the actress to me. Beautiful, beautiful. By Jem Tyler Miller, The Body in the Library Award. Hemi recalls from the opulence of the Paran penthouse and rests her hand against the rain-streaked window. Taking a breath, she focuses on the sea wall below her, willing her resolve to be stubborn like the wall. Iron grey waves pound the concrete monolith and create a spray so high it reaches the seagulls that glide above it, as well as the teams constructing the next wall, some 20 metres inland of the first. This one promises to be higher, thicker, stronger. It's the fourth such wall to be built on this stretch of coast that Hemi can recall. Detective Inspector Navarro! Hemi swings to face her team to confront the world that has made these sea barriers necessary. Her booties whisper as she walks to observe the victim. If it weren't for the crimson bloom on his shirt, he would be camouflaged against the muted luxury of the rest of the penthouse, his penthouse. Even the spines on the books in the library match the pallid decor. Have we isolated the doctor yet? Hemi asks. I want to speak to them before they have a chance to change their story. Yes, Inspector. The assistant nearest her glances down as he speaks, as he has been trained to do, to avoid recording any of Hemi's expressions with his contact lenses. And the wife, where is she? She looks around at her team. Take him to the bedroom, Inspector. The stout one answers this time. The smart one. The one most likely to take her job. I've taken an initial statement. And the surrogate hasn't been moved since we found her. Hemi can feel the smart one wanting to look at her, but knows her underling will save that glance for when Hemi is at her weakest. The surrogate has been catatonic the entire time. Hemi focuses in on the woman draped alongside the victim's body, her eyes lingering over the holographic knife that spins by the accused's hand, now that the real weapon has been removed for analysis. The bright fabric of the woman's dress clings to her round stomach, where the blood has touched it, while the skirt flutters in the draft of the climate system. Hemi switches her lenses to diagnostic and scans the woman. Aside from being in a trance, the science shows the surrogate is otherwise healthy, as 2 heartbeats drum steadily inside her. She has confessed, Inspector. I haven't recorded. If you're satisfied, we'll have her moved to, so we can process the body. Hemi nods. Prison welfare officers are motioned in their turquoise suits sign as they lift the heavily pregnant surrogate and shuffle her towards a polished glass lift. As gravity takes her down, the surrogate's eyes flick to the victim. From the hallway behind Hemi come the thuds of a scuffle. A body's pushed against a wall, heels clatter as they struggle for purchase on the wooden floor, and a tall blonde in a linen pantsuit strides into the living room, bringing a drift of perfume in her wake. She scans Hemi's team for the person in command. I hope you've arrested the surrogate, she says to the stout assistant. If she's guilty, Mrs. Takano, she'll be charged. Hemi steers the wife away from her husband's body in the library, through to a space that is more gallery than home. They settle in a sparse kitchen, beside a long marble bench. I need you to tell me what you saw. The blonde fills a highball with water from the recycler. She takes a large gulp, her eyes still wide. Like I told you, officer, I was supposed to be gardening, but I forgot my gloves, so I came down from the roof to get them, and that's when I found that bitch with a knife to Yuki's chest. She was screaming, claiming she wouldn't hand over our baby. The wife takes another sip and places the glass onto the bench. She looked right at me, daring me to stop her as she plunged the knife in. I could have sworn I'll be next, so I ran as fast as I could. The wife shows Hemi where she claims to have hidden down the hallway over a run of real animal hides to the bedroom. There is a smell to the luxurious bedchamber, a mixture of earth and paper. Replica antiques rest on low bookshelves filled with actual books, as opposed to the holographic ones in the library. Everything in this room is crafted from vital resources. Above a sleek jarrah bed that could warm an entire family dangles the stuffed head of a bear. Nutraceuticals must be a lucrative business, Mrs. Takano, says Hemi. The wife folds her arms. Well, state-permitted diet hastens our extinction. How else are we meant to survive? Hemi lets the reply hang as she wanders around the space. She compares this room to her own meagre apartment with its bed shelf and solitary table and chair. The only feature that distinguishes her apartment from others is an intricate jade carving of a horse on her desk, fashioned by her grandfather. Hemi traces the curves of the netsuki with her fingertips each night and feels the smooth, cool jade, imagining a time when horses were ridden by people, before the rationalisation of life on Earth saw them disappear. Hemi turns to the window. Do you think greed is what killed your husband, Mrs. Takano? The blonde picks up a nutraceuticals bottle from the vast collection next to her bed and pops the pill. Well, people always want more than they're entitled to, don't they? Hemi runs a hand across the silken furs on the bed. She doesn't need to look further than this room to see that what the widow is saying is true. Switching her lenses to UV mode, Hemi scans Yuki Takano's wife for trace evidence while processing the rest of her complaints. The constant harassment of her husband by people from below, demanding drugs they can't afford. Only she doesn't call them people. Hemi finds soil on the wife, but no blood, consistent with her claim to have been gardening at the time of the murder. She takes samples for analysis while the wife stares past the looming turbines that spin over the angry sea. As the blades whoosh past, the wife dabs her eye with her scarf. How can I raise a child on my own? Hemi considers the options available, the suburbs of women who will apply for the position of nanny simply to breathe the clean air provided by the penthouse. How did you purchase the baby, Mrs. Takano? Oh, we paid handsomely for it, more than fair compensation for that filthy surrogate's mother's life credit, and to think she wanted more money. The wife summons a holographic screen and commands the required documentation to open. As you can see, it's all in order. Signed contracts legitimising the surrogacy flash before Hemi, as well as the acquisition of life number 4-587-44943-921 and the printable rationing chip that is to be inserted into the baby once born. Hemi's fingers fly as she breaks down the documents to ensure validity. Forgeries are near impossible to detect, but not for Hemi. She's risen quickly through the ranks, not only because of her unwavering belief in rational thinking and the pursuit of truth, but also because of her ability to beat the hackers who discovered their niche when the world's population was capped at 11 billion and the one in, one out policy came into effect. Satisfied Mrs. Takano's papers are in order, Hemi confirms the baby growing inside the flaw-stricken surrogate does indeed belong to Mrs. Adele Takano of Paran. Another of her grey-suited assistants appears by the door. "Excuse me, Inspector, victim welfare has arrived." Back in the library space, Henry instructs her team. "Confirm lenses are working." She needs the feed to civilian rights to be seamless. With a case of this profile, any glitches will stream to the 7 o'clock news. When the crime scene is cleared of interference, Henry examines the body. The accuracy of the Japanese sushi blade is impressive. Death would have been instantaneous. Even if the doctor had arrived sooner, there was nothing they could do. But knowing what little she does of this man and his obscene wealth, Henry has no idea if the victim was deserving of such a quick end. Henry gazes along the coast to where high-rise waterfront luxury dominates, where the Australian Echo Riche, like the man lying before her, demonstrate no fear of the rising sea. They simply force the relocation of those in the Unta so that their newly commissioned penthouses can be built above the slums of the next suburb inland whenever they're required to move. Henry rises and turns to her team. "Bring in the doctor, please." Down the street, in the humid shadows of the towering condos, Henry slushes through the debris of the coastal Unta. Tarps cover doorways and entrances to small burrows where makeshift furniture is raised on blocks as high above the waterline as possible. More at ease here than she is above, Henry breathes in the scent of survival. She presses the speaker attached to her ear and orders her cavalcade to get ready for departure. I want the surrogate prepped for interview." Confident all will be arranged when she arrives back at base, she takes a moment to shut down the look by closing her eyes. The Bayside drive along St Kilda Road takes less than 5 minutes. Vehicles glide beneath the shadows of the only remaining green leafy space in the city, where tall trees with enormous mottled trunks glisten as they hold all past wrongs in their rings. The trees line the street and add a solemnity that reminds citizens of the reason behind the shrine beyond, that peace wasn't always upon them. When this part of the coast is followed by the sea, Henry doesn't want to be here to see it. She hopes to have earned retirement by then, to be sent to one of the bright Tasmanian homes reserved for those whose service to the state is noteworthy, whose luck has been earned, where the view from her window will always be green. The interview room is light and airy, and the climate has been controlled to make everyone relax. Henry angles the shutters, forcing light across the surrogate's face. She pulls her chair so close she could smell the harsh processing soap on the surrogate's skin. Shara Romano, life number 7-500-797-163. Do you understand why we have detained you? The surrogate's voice is steady, but she doesn't look at Henry when she answers. Because Yuki is dead. Well, you confessed to my officers that you killed him. Is that correct? The surrogate says nothing. Can you explain your relationship with the deceased for the record, please? He's the father of my baby. It's not your baby, Shara, says Henry. The baby belongs to Mrs. Takano. Her embryo was inserted. Hemi leans back in her chair and considers the woman with the large, downcast eyes. Shira Romano's behaviour is common in the Unter, where education is less than basic. You have no claim, I'm afraid, Shira. You're simply the host. The law is very clear on this. The surrogate's eyes lift for the first time. You're not listening. I told you the baby is mine. A heaviness swells in Hemi's gut. She considers her last 3 cases instances where women from the Unter lied in a bid to secure clean air for a child they couldn't surrender. She leans in closer. If the baby is not the Takano's, you have no right to give birth. You no longer own the life credit. And if you sold your eggs, then the baby becomes a ward of the state to be unsold. You know that. The law was created to protect you, so situations like this do not happen. The surrogate falls silent. Is that why you killed him? Asks Hemi. Because Yuki Takano was going to report you? Shira studies the hands in her lap. By 4 o'clock, the sun has given up its attempts to penetrate the dense cloud above the city. The streets of the Richmond Unter glow with the warmth of conversation and wood fires. Smells of damp washing, spiced food and smoke curl together, unpleasant only when the stench of excrement and the open-air composting units combine. Hemi considers the spoils of the universal basic income, while rain splashes her into the water around her feet and her lenses lose signal. Laughter and phlegm-filled coughs stream from the alleyways while she dodges umbrellas and plastic ponchoed couriers on bikes, and the street vendors smile and nod at her. Young men and women approach, tapping her arms as they ask if she's up for some company. There is a liveliness in the Unter that is foreign to Hemi's world and to those above in the heights. Hemi arrives at Shira's lean-to with numb feet. Attached to the remains of an old miner's cottage, the lean-to is propped beneath a stacked high-rise and stinks of wet wool and car parts. Shira's quadrant, section K, is one of the better slum areas where the revoking of life privileges for crimes has been an effective deterrent. Either that or the willingness to report crime is low. Hemi steps from a series of 44-gallon drums onto a raised rag mat floor where she is assaulted with colour. Tibetan prayer flags crisscross a sari-filled canopy while a gallery of painted canvases block the wind. Mismatched furniture fills the space and a dozen perfumed candles flicker. There is a sequin cushion with half its scales missing. Here, inside the shanty, Hemi has stepped back into the thick of history, into the old world, where colour was permitted to flourish. As fire heats the next room, as a child sits upon the knee of an old woman who is reading to her from a screen, the girl's eyes are the same magnificent eyes of the surrogates, although there is no record of the child existing. The old woman flicks her apron like a lizard's tongue and closes the door of the pot belly as she races to hide the orange glow of the coals. Hemi flashes her badge. I'm not climate control, if that's what you're worried about, and my lenses don't work down here. But the old woman is not put at ease. "Where's Shira?" she says. "Arrested for murder." Hemi studies the child. She looks well cared for. The woman breathes noisily as she moves the girl from her knee and stands to stoke the fire. "Shira could never kill anyone. She's a believer in the old ways." The pain in the old woman's hip is evident as she ambles across to a black lace curtain. Her hand sweeps back the fabric to reveal a smoky altar filled with statues: Isis, Ganesh, the Virgin Mary. They stare at Hemi with opaque eyes and posed humility. Such artefacts are rare, even in the Unter, where faith has taken longer to stamp out. And Hemi is intrigued by how the surrogate has sourced them. She lifts one up. It's lighter than expected and pokes about amongst the incest coils until she finds an expensive collection of nutraceuticals. She picks up a bottle. Superstition never could stand up to the scrutiny of science. The old woman meets her gaze. Well, then again, there are some things you simply just know. Hemi becomes still as she turns back to the altar and the candles flicker. Back at the station, within the grey walls of her work cell, Hemi rescans the evidence. She clocks off to avoid any interruptions by Fair Work Affairs before re-examining the inventory at the murder scene, the list of every item found in the penthouse. Hemi's staff have been thorough. The single set of prints on the knife belonged to Shira Romano. The blood on her dress is Yuki Takano's, and the soil samples taken from both the floor and Adele Takano are a match to the rooftop garden. The family physician, Dr. Crawford, confirmed all three were alive and healthy when they completed their antenatal exam early that morning. Dr. Crawford was later called back by Adele Takano to check on her husband before the police arrived. Based on the evidence, Hemi's decision to arrest Shira is sound. An email from the Commissioner suggesting she close the case to prevent further civil unrest backs this up. The rumours of the forced removal of children by the Echo Riche is gaining traction, but the unease in Hemi's gut remains persistent. It whispers for her to look closely at the science, at the truth in the inventory, which she placates by reopening the file and tapping her ear. Get me a warrant for the Takano building, including surrounds, and patch me through to Dr. Crawford's delivery suite right away. Arriving in Paran, the mandated 10 hours later, the construction of the seawall is again in full swing. Hover cranes drop apartment-sized blocks of recycled concrete into place with only the slightest disturbance to these rich people's lives. Mrs. Takano's face is fully made up when she answers, as if she's expecting Hemi's company. She floats through the house in a silken nightdress and settles upon the couch, insisting Hemi call her Adele. I need to know more about the murder weapon, Mrs. Takano. I believe it came from your kitchen. I want to know how it came into the surrogate's possession. Adele Takano smooths a wrinkle in her gown. The blade is early 21st century Japanese. I gave it to Yuki for our anniversary this year. He sliced the sashimi with it the night before he... Her voice becomes quiet. I'm guessing she grabbed it from the kitchen. Hemi rubs the soft fabric of the chair between her thumb. The fish for the sashimi will have been wild caught, not taken from the tanks on the lower levels of the building. It's strange, Mrs. Takano, don't you think, that Yuki's prints aren't on the handle? Adele Takano narrows her eyes. I keep a clean house, Inspector, and Yuki loved that gift. Hemi stares at the widow. It was the perfect choice for you to kill him with, then, wasn't it? Adele Takano doesn't blink. You trust the words of a surrogate who will do anything to keep my baby? Where are your gardening gloves, Mrs. Takano? The ones you came down to collect the morning your husband was murdered. I've searched the inventory We couldn't find them in your house. The widow crosses her legs. They must be above. After all, when I came down, the surrogate had the knife already poised, so I guess I didn't have the time to realise I'd left them on the roof. We've searched the roof, Mrs. Takano, and the garden shed. The gloves aren't there. The widow doesn't break her stare. Henry relaxes into the couch. I think we both know why the knife has no prints on it. What confuses me though, Mrs. Takano, is how you thought you were going to pass the baby off as biologically yours. I've spoken to your doctor, who is keen to avoid prosecution. Blood tests give us the truth, just like the DNA we found on the gloves on the roof of one of the lean-tos beside this building. Defeated, the grieving widow morphs into downtrodden wife. It was Yuki's idea. He said we were rich enough for people not to ask questions. We tried for years to have a baby. When Yuki suggested a donor, I said I would carry it, that I wanted to. He convinced me it was easier to find a surrogate for the entire thing. But then that piece of unta goes and screws everything up by claiming Yuki loves her. She insisted he leave me if he wanted to keep the baby, that he leave all this. And when he agreed, Mrs. Takano, the real Adele Takano emerges, debuting in a single satisfied smile. That stupid bitch took the knife right from my gloved hand, sobbing she had killed him. So I told it to her straight. Yes, she most certainly had. The surrogate sits in the interview room, bathed in the weak natural light. Her eyes are swollen from crying. You are to return to your quadrant as soon as you've given birth, Shira. The rest, I'm afraid, is up to the courts. You've been cleared of Yuki Takano's murder, but you have still broken the law. The surrogate grabs Henry's hand so tightly it burns. Well, what if I can prove he loved me? She says. Then can I keep my son? Henry wrenches her hand back from the desperate woman. Is love something you can ever prove? All I know is that if you are to keep the baby, you must prove the existence of a true relationship with intended parentage beyond all scientific doubt. The valley is wide and green and smells of fresh rain. A tired sun glints off the solar-panelled mountainside and from the veranda of the small log farmhouse. Henry watches workers tend to the crops beneath the spinning turbines. From a horse pen next to the farmhouse, a playful whinny echoes across the valley as a stallion, the deepest of blacks, kicks and bucks. Its muscles ripple as it races round the yard, and Henry is mesmerised. Never before has she seen anything insist on remaining free, even though it is imprisoned. 6 months ago, Shira Romano gave birth to a son and was forced to surrender him to the state. Buildings were destroyed while vehicles burnt across all quadrants. And even now, every second of Shira Romano's trial can be seen on screens across the country, and Hemi, who is yet to provide testimony, has been forced to come here to find the evidence she needs to tell the absolute truth. An old man scrapes his walking stick on the wooden floor. He speaks Chinese at her through his toothless gums. Mr. Kano was very clear. It was to be a lifetime lease based on all intended occupants and their descendants. When the door creaks open and she's welcomed into the farmhouse, Hemi is greeted by bursts of orange, purple, crimson. Every inch of the abode is colourful. and textured with cushions and throws. She steps inside and moves through the living space and discovers 3 bedrooms. The first, next to the nursery, is made up for a little girl. The ceiling is painted with stars, and Hemi stands beneath them, looking up at what she knows from books to be the night sky. She scans the furniture, a small bed and dresser and a scattering of toys, before inspecting a photo on the wall. Thank you. It is the picture of Yuki Takano smiling with his arms around Shira and a younger version of her daughter while they laugh in front of the Freedom Monument. The obelisk is decorated with the regalia of the Republic's bicentenary celebrations, and green and gold flags flutter in the background. Hemi had surveyed these celebrations as a newly minted inspector almost 3 years ago. The photo would need to be authenticated. "Did anyone else ever come here?" she says. She startles the old man as he sweeps the floor. He turns to her slowly. "Takano was the only one." "Did you find evidence of a quantifiable loving relationship between the deceased and the accused, Inspector Navarro?" says the centre judge of the High Court. Hemi takes a breath and scans the packed courtroom. She knows the Commissioner, as well as billions of eyes from above and below, are drilling into her now. She turns to the judge. The end. Congratulations.
Thanks, Susanna. Beautifully read and a great story. And I think you'll all agree there's something really beautiful about being read to as adults. Like, we don't get enough of that. It's one of the real delights of an evening like this for me. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our next reader, Dr. Leigh Redhead. Well, I was thinking when I was reminded that I needed to introduce you as Dr. Redhead, that remember we were going to form that axis of evil? Yeah. Dr. Savage, Dr. Redhead, and my friend Dr. Black. I know, and then COVID cut there, but we should go back to that idea, I reckon. Dr. Redhead has worked on a prawn trawler and as a waitress, exotic dancer, masseuse, teacher, and apprentice chef. She is the author of the award-winning Simone Kirsch Private Eye series, Peep Show, Rubdown, Cherry Pie, and Thrill City. She recently completed a standalone crime novel set in an alternative community in the early 80s as part of her PhD in Australian noir fiction. Leigh's going to read Death's Waiting Room, which was Claire Fletcher's winning story from 2021. Claire lives in Sydney, so she can't be with us tonight. She grew up in regional Queensland, a setting she returns to in her debut novel, a romantic comedy, 5 Bush Weddings, published in 2022. Claire manages communications for the Walkley Foundation for Journalism and lives in Sydney with her husband and daughter. Over to you, Leigh.
Thank you.
All right, does it sound okay?
Yep.
Death's Waiting Room. I'm sitting in the lounge, pretending to read a large print Agatha Christie, when that slimy young orderly sidles up to the matron. "There's a body in the library, ma'am." "Oh, no, not again, Giles." He nods. Matron rolls her watery eyes skyward behind her neat round spectacles and sighs in exasperation. "They do keep dropping off there, don't they? Poor souls. Have you closed off the room?" He nods again. "Let's clean it up before any of the others get the wobbles," she says. Matron sets a brisk pace and the orderly follows. Their entire conversation has taken place at full volume, but when I look around the lounge, no one else has reacted. They're engrossed in their bridge, Monopoly, jigsaws, and droopy crochet and giant word jumbles, or if they're Marguerite Bosman, their own reflection in the darkening window panes. I'm still learning most people's names, but she's easy to remember. Forever preening at her perm, eyebrows drawn on a half-inch higher than anyone else's, always touching the chaps on the arm while laughing a laugh someone must have once told her was musical. Don't forget Marguerite, there's a body in the library. I leave my book on the poof and shuffle as fast as I can behind Matron. The Miss Marple stories are always so boring. I'm in a long hallway, hung with dusty portraits of long dead landed gentry, with the slightly off chins and noses of the densely bred. No doubt any paintings of real value were stripped before the family moved out, but it's still an impressive prospect. My slippers shuffle along the carpet, a threadbare but genuine Persian. I just catch sight of Giles turning into a door at the end of the hallway. I never wanted to come here, but after I buried Bill, they didn't give me a choice. Relax, they said. Let someone else cook and clean for you. Meet some other people with similar interests. You can catch up on your reading and stroll around those beautiful Sloxley Manor gardens. I'll admit, I was excited to see the inside of the building. When I was a girl, we'd cycle out to the estate from the village and hide in the hedgerows to catch a glimpse of the Sloxley family. They were like celebrities to us. The old dowager in her dark silks, the lord in his tweeds and shooting hat, the lady draped in furs. She must have had dozens of hats. We decided we were desperate to see their jewels. They went the way of so many of their ilk, their grand house crumbling around them, a whiff of scandal, a modern townhouse in the city, and a quick sale to developers. They made it the latest in a lucrative franchise of retirement homes, luring us in with a promise of old world glamour and lush lawns. The curiosity was enough to get us in the door, and that was usually all our sons and daughters needed to put the old family home on the market to cover the astronomical fees and tell themselves they'd done the right thing. When I peer around the doorframe, at first glance the library is a peaceful haven. Stuffed couches and walls lined with books. A huge portrait of the late Dowager Sloxley in haughty profile glares down over one wall of bookcases. The old first editions replaced with Reader's Digest volumes. There's even a fire going on in the hearth. But when I see the toes of poor William's slippers pointing up to the sky, Giles bent over her preparing to roll her onto a gurney. She'd be as light as a bird on tiny bones and a puddle of fine knit wool. Matron tuts and pulls a sheet over Wilma after they snap the gurney up to waist height. But the sheet catches on the door frame as they wheel her out past where I pressed myself behind the grandfather clock. I wish I could say she looks peaceful, but her face is contorted with fear. When Matron and Giles are in sight, I creep into the library. I wonder what Wilma was doing in her last moments. Whether she knew what was coming. It's hardly the great unspoken in here, Death. Gallows humour is the order of the day, along with a steady stream of laxatives and long litanies of aches and ailments. This is the first body since I moved in 2 weeks ago, but of course it won't be the last. They don't call it Death's waiting room for nothing. Something catches onto my slipper and I stumble, suddenly nose to the carpet where Wilma breathed her last. Falls aren't anything to laugh about anymore. Each time I lay there for a moment of stillness, doing an audit of bones and joints, waiting for something to go really wrong. Then I imagine Bill looking down at me, "Get up, Vi, you silly old woman," and dust myself off, sheepish. I realise what tripped me. Scooping up the tiny shoe from the Monopoly set and put it in my pocket absent-mindedly. "Oh, Wilma!" Marguerite sobs at the breakfast table. Barry Jones puts a leathery arm around her, while Milton Hall offers his hanky from the seat opposite. Spiros Roll arrives with fresh toast for her. Jessica Crank huffs and rolls her eyes. Healthy men are a precious commodity in here, and Marguerite doesn't make herself any friends by monopolising them. "Cat biscuits!" yelps Annette. She floated free from any tether to reality long before I arrived. I saw her massaging butter into the hallway curtains earlier that morning. We'd both watched the cleaners working over Wilma's room, ready for the next client from the waiting list. "I don't think I can go to the library alone," Marguerite sniffles. Oh, scorch you, doll! Barry's many years of sunbathing have left him looking like a sentient Chesterfield. He still strips down at the first sign of sunshine and lays out on the lawn in his white fronts. You'd think he and Marge would be a good match, two randy old goats, but neither of them wants to settle down. He shoots me a wink, then Jessica. I'm here anytime you need a strong man to lean on. Ridiculous man, Jessica mutters. As it turns out, Barry's not much use to anyone to lean on. Less than a week later, Marguerite goes into the library and finds him spread eagled on the floor. He seemed to be in rude health, I say. He was definitely rude, Jessica admits. And it's Marge playing with Trinket. What's that you got there? It was in Barry's hand when I found him, Marge said. She holds out her palm, and it's the dog from the Monopoly set. The matron senses me hovering outside her office door before I can come up with anything to say. Something you needed, Violet, she says, still facing her giant computer screen. I was just curious after Wilma and Barry. She turns to give me her full attention then, takes off her glasses, rubs the bridge of her nose. I would have told you she was in her 40s, but seeing her this way I realise she's older than I thought. I wonder what it's like for her spending every day overseeing a cranky bunch of senior citizens, an unrelenting vision of all the boredom and indignity her future eventually holds. It can be hard when you first arrive in a place like this to be so confronted with how often people pass away, she says with practised gentleness. Some find comfort in the chapel, or we can help you organise to speak to a counsellor. I ask her if there's an investigation when someone dies. Oh, of course, there's a lot of paperwork whenever our client passes. We make sure no detail is missed out of respect. Best practice is always our mission here at Slokesley Manor. What happened to Barry? He seems so vigorous. I'm afraid I can't discuss details like that, but I can assure you that the doctor said he wouldn't have felt any pain. I stuffed my slippers at the carpet. I feel like a schoolgirl at the headmistress's office. I can't find the words for what feels wrong. Why don't you go and have a cup of tea and a lie down, Mrs. Smith? It can be very upsetting when you lose a friend. Pirate niggers! Walk the plank, you monkey cutlass! Annette shrieking, her nonsense at a more fevered pitch than usual. There's a parrot on his shoulder that repeats what he says. Shiver me timbers! When it doesn't let up, I follow her voice. I'm not the only one. By the time I arrive at the door of the library, Marguerite and Jessica are also there. We all see Annette shaking Spiros by the shoulders in the big wing-back chair. Annette, Marguerite cues, let or spit us alone. Annette turns and reveals that Spiros is no longer with us. His eyes are glassy. Those hands that could have fixed anything just hang uselessly. Marguerite flings herself at his knees, keening, which makes Jessica roll her eyes. Giles trundles in with his gurney. Back to your rooms, please, ladies, he says. We all linger until he begins to shoo us out. I catch a glint of something beside the chair, drop my handkerchief and make a show of stooping to pick it up. When I unbunch the hanky back in my room, it's the Monopoly ship. I don't know who I can trust here. I wait for my turn for the phone booth. Dial my son. Something strange is going on, I say. He's barely listening to me, already congratulating himself for taking the call, calculating how long he can put off a visit. People keep dying. Oh, Mum, it's just the sad reality of living in one of these places. People reach the end of their road. I'm just not sure these are natural deaths. Think about it, Brian, I said. It's the perfect crime. No one's surprised by finding a body. There's no investigation. Any possible witnesses are easily discredited. Mum, are you feeling all right? I'll have to call the matron about your medication. They're leaving clues. They want to be discovered. If no one else is going to investigate, I'll have to do it. Is it always like this? I asked Milton in the lounge after dinner. The sun's still streaming in the windows. They feed us in the middle of the afternoon. The meat changes, but they're always grey peas stranded in a moat of gravy around an unnatural mound of mashed potato. It took me a while to figure out what was so unsettling about the potato. until I saw the hair-knitted kitchen staff plopping it onto each plate with an ice cream scoop. Each day, as they placed the plate in front of me, I hear Bill's voice in my head. I'm old, not a farm animal. Give me something I can chew for God's sake. How do you mean? Milton says. I lean in, lower my voice. Doesn't it seem like there have been an awful lot of deaths recently? Already there's a new woman in Wilma's room, Deirdre. She has a mobile phone with giant buttons. Made me look at photos of her slack-jawed grandchildren on it. Milton shrugs. That's par for the course, love. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. Soon enough, death is just about as boring as everything else in here. Now, shall we have a game? He lifts the lid on the Monopoly box. I turn my shudder into a shake of the head. No, thank you. That'd be right. Half the pieces are gone. I refuse to be an iron or a sodding thimble, Milton grumbles, pushing the box away. Much regard, burlesque! And it crows. Oh, that's what she's having, Milton says. It's like a bloody fighter in circles in her mind. A sight more exciting than this load of busted ball games. Poor old Barry and Sparrows probably just died of boredom. It's got to be some kind of poison, I think. Something that leaves no marks, no trace. Just then, raised voices across the room distract us both. Stop mooning away at your reflection in the window, you vain old cow, Jessica yells. Excuse me for feeling a little introspective, Marguerite shouts back tearfully. I'm mourning my poor friends gone so soon. You should try some empathy sometime. Mourning a bit of intrigue and flirting, more like. How dare you? Everyone knows they found Spiros with a pocket full of little blue pills, Jessica says. No wonder his heart gave out. No doubt Barry slipped him a few from his stash. But I wonder if he led him to hope he'd get lucky. Marguerite gives a strangled scream and runs from the room as fast as her cane can carry her. So, not very fast. It's an excruciating wait for everyone else in the room to hold off gossiping until she's finally out in the hallway. Well, that was better than neighbours, Milton says. Why is Jessica always so surly? I ask. I think she feels the boredom more than most. Apparently she used to be a hotshot chemical engineer, genius level. She's never forgiven her daughter for putting her in here. Sharp as a tack she is, a chemist. I wonder if Marguerite needs a shoulder to cry on. Excuse me, Vi. It's Milton who finds Marguerite. Her precious perm spilling over the writing desk by the library window where she's slumped. He's howling, the tiny silver race car in his hand. When I get to the library, so much for being bored by death. Jessica beat me to the library, and so did Annette, pausing in her thoughtful licking of the wallpaper to glance at me as I entered. Come on, Milton, I say, trying to pull him to his feet. Giblets and goblets, shrieks Annette. The gurney rolls in. Ouch, Giles sighs, herding us all onto the hallway. Matronising me as I go, Milton leaning against my shoulder. You're never far from the drama, are you, Violet? Matron says, as she closes the door in my face. Neither is Jessica, I think. Good riddance to that preposterous peacock, speaks the devil. She's barely cold, Jessica, I hiss as Milton bursts into fresh tears. Suddenly Annette stops and looks me direct in the eye. You'll be next, she mutters, then looks away. What? I gasp. A sturdy strap-on! Is her only response. There's not much conversation at dinner. There are a few more new faces, people I haven't met yet. What's the point in learning their names? I'm pushing things around my plate when Milton barks across the table. How's the investigation going, Vi? That gets everyone's attention. What investigation? Jessica snaps. She thinks there's a serial killer, Milton says, and I'm starting to believe her. There's a ripple of whispers across the dining room. Poppycock, says Jessica, what evidence do you have? None yet, I have to admit. I force myself to hold her eye. Something's not right. Tell him your theory about the Monopoly pieces, Milton says, before I can shush him. Excuse me, I have to make a phone call, I say, rushing out of the room. Brian? Oh, bugger, it's voicemail. Brian, it's Mum. Look, I've been exposed. The killer knows I'm looking for them. I need to figure this out before they take me out. If anything happens, Don't forget to prune your father's apple tree every winter. I have to escalate the investigation. I decide on a stakeout. I stuff a bundle of my clothes under the bed sheets and sneak out into the library. I find a spot behind the wing-back chair against the window frame. Some weak light trickles in the window, and once my eyes adjust to the gloom, I find I can see fairly well. Odd. The fire's still going on in here. It makes me drowsy. I don't know how long I doze. A lamp clicks on, and I hear Milton muttering. Where is it? Matron said she saw my book in here, but I can't think where I would have left it. He shuffles around the room and I hold my breath. Milton, it's late, dear. Let's get you back to bed. As Matron walks across the beam of lamplight, her profile and silhouette is a perfect match for the portrait of old Lady Sloxley looming over the bookcases. I rack my brain trying to remember where I'd seen her name. A sign on her desk, a name tag, a scrawl on a clipboarded form. Nothing. You're a bit unsteady on your feet there, Milton. Take a seat for a moment, Matron says, guiding him to a chair. It's so warm in here, Milton says. The heat is making me confused too. My brain racing in circles, trying to catch something out of reach. A steady stream of new clients taking the place of my fallen comrades. The exorbitant, non-refundable deposit. Here, Milton, I've got a glass of milk for you. That should help you get back to sleep. She guides the glass to his mouth. Oh God, I think I've got to stop her. My legs are asleep. Move, Violet. Bill's voice comes to me. It's just Milton though, he's such a whinger. Get the evidence. I pull Deirdre's phone from my pocket, fumbling to find the camera. These buttons are ridiculous. Finally, I hold it up, framing Matron leaning over Milton in the chair, tilting the last of the glass's contents into his face. I press the button. There's an obnoxious sound and a flash that illuminates the room. Bugger. Mrs. Smith, I should have known you'd be out of bed. You just don't know what's good for you, do you? What have you given Milton? I ask, pulling my voice to remain steady. His head is nodded down to his chest. You're a very nosy old woman with some strange ideas, Matron says. I know what you've been doing, I say. I just don't understand why you wanted to be discovered. Matron lets out an exasperated sigh that turns into a roar of frustration. You never let up your bats with your beady eyes, watching everything, gossiping about everything, nothing but time on your hands, moping about how bored you are all the time. There are no new books, why can't we have a new television? I don't like this vast selection of board games. Maybe I just wanted to fuck with you all by stealing half the Monopoly set. Did you ever think about that? That doesn't really explain the murders, I venture. I hate what they've done to this place. This was a grand house. It should have been my grand house, my birthright, and instead it's crawling with toothless, half-mad geriatrics, jumping in and out of each other's beds and rubbing butter into the drapes. It's perverse! It's a disgrace to the Sloxley name. She takes a panting breath. I scan the room for escape routes, but there's only one doorway. I'd never get past it. I figured if some of the old geezers can't get it under suspicious circumstances, they'd have to shut the place down. I never thought it would take this long to be found out. But finally, you stuck your neck out too far, and now I have the perfect scapegoat to frame. It's all become too much for you, so this last scene in the library, we're murder-suicide. She's rushing at me now, with a small vial of something and a rag. I'm trapped. She grabs me roughly, snapping rubber gloves onto my hands, forcing the violence into my fingers. Goodbye, Mrs. Smith, Matron says. I'm on the floor. Oh God, is this it? I run down through my body from head to toe, scanning for pain. Get up, Leigh, you silly woman. It's Jessica, branding an iron poker she appears to have just used to cave in the back of Matron's skull. I sit up slowly. Milton? He's gone, Jessica says. But I got Matron's confession on tape, borrowed Giles's iPhone. She's dead, I asked. Should be. Don't worry, we're good off in self-defence. Well, you might be able to try for mental incapacitation, but I'm not taking any chances on having to spend a single day more in a hellhole like this. Come on, we'd best raise the alarm. My teeth are chattering, I can't bring myself to move, and I sit there on the floor while she goes out. I sit there while Giles comes in and throws a sheet over Matron, while the sirens scream closer and the blue and red lights wash through the window. They circle around the library's walls like a sickening school dance. Later, after the court stuff's taken care of and we've moved into a smart little duplex Jessica found with a compensation payout, she teases me about how queasy I was that night. "You are such a cute little old lady detective," she says, pouring my tea. "How could you go into a stakeout like that with no plan to defend yourself against the killer?" "Pardon me for being an amateur," I huff. "You made me look like a right tit in front of everyone too." "Sorry, love. I couldn't risk Matron knowing I was onto her. That place was full of loose lips, and not just after the false teeth came out." We've got an ironclad contract with our kids that we can't be moved into a home again. Savings put aside for live-in nurses if the need arises. And it turns out people like amateur cute old lady detectives if the sales of my not-so-cozy crime series are any indication. We might be in death's waiting room, but we get fresh magazines every week. The G&Ts over our Monopoly games certainly help us pass the time too.
Well done, Leigh, and well done, Claire. That was so enjoyable. Now, we've got a special announcement tonight, which I believe Susanna is going to make for us. Yes? You can come up?
Gosh, I wish I had a bit more wine in my glass.
Someone please, the table's just over there.
Could someone able-bodied please
Red or
stand over and bring me wine? Now, I haven't prepared this little announcement, but I've been reading the stories of the body in the library now for about 6-7 years with Leigh and occasionally Jane Clifton, our friend, and Sue. And I've always enjoyed it, and I must say, thank you, my dear, I must say I love being involved with Sisters in Crime. So I wrote, after my career at the ABC, took a deep dive through no fault of my own. I was rescued by a friend and another lapsed lawyer called James Morton in London, who'd written a lot of true crime books about England and the Cray brothers and all those, people. And he said, "Do you know, Australia has got more crime per capita than any other country in the world?" And I said, "Brilliant! So what?" So he suggested we write some true crime books, and a couple of our books are bestsellers, and we got to, I think, 14, Carmel told me. I lost track. I have to give my sincere thanks to James Morton, who really pulled me out of the toilet and out of a deep depression. So, true crime. But I could never apply for a Sisters in Crime award because I had a male co-writer. Fair enough. And, but I've always been involved. I love doing the readings. I love crime fiction. And not long ago, probably Carl and I got stoned together or something. And I said, I love reading. I get asked to do it at St Kilda Library, and I just love reading. And my first ever job as an actor was reading for, what are they called? Talking books for the Braille Library. And I know a few other actors that started out there. And if you can read The Women's Room with all the different accents and all the different sort of complications in that book, shows how long ago it was, then you can do anything as an actor. So then I've had a very mixed career, up and down, like a dummy seat, and I kind of gave up the true crime because you get to a stage where you just think, I don't want to think any worse about human beings than I already do. So I don't really want to know about these ghastly, horrible, bloody, true crimes. And I've always loved the Scarlet Stiletto books, and Leigh and I have read dozens, haven't we, over the years? And I've read Leigh's books, and I've read and met with some of the stars of Sisters in Crime who've, you're one, honey, you're going to go ahead, you with the red hat down there, my author. And so it's just been a wonderful involvement with Sisters in Crime. So when Carl and I had this free-range thinking expedition, I said, I love reading, and there's been hundreds of Sisters in Crime, Scarlet Stiletto Awards, Body in the Library Awards, short stories. I have become, since COVID, a podcast addict. I listen to everything. I listen to philosophy, science, AI, I listen to everything. And I noticed how many true crime podcasts there were. And I thought, that's interesting. Bugger all crime fiction. A niche, I thought. And so we got our heads together, and I have to say it's been wonderful to work with Carmel so closely over the last few months, and Leigh has helped us, and I have to give a shout out to my friend Tim Coy, who has done all the technology, because Carl and I go, how do we upload? What is RSS? Okay. And he's done all the technology for us. And because I'm going overseas next week, I've read the first 10 and a half. And so we're going to have weekly podcasts called Scarlet Stiletto Bites, because short stories, and we've done some promos. And we are going to give you a tempting little taste of the very first story written by Christina Leigh, who's an academic now, isn't she? Yeah.
Retired emeritus professor.
Retired emeritus professor, I bow to you wherever you are. Christina Lee's not here, is she?
No, she's
Queensland, okay. So, without any further ado, and acknowledging that when I was a school student, I used to work in George's in my school holidays, and my first on-stage acting job was here in the Athenaeum Theatre with MTC. I'm going to ask James to play just the first 10 minutes of our very first podcast. And what we need you to do, and all the Sisters in Crime, is to, I've got to remember this, share, follow, subscribe for free, we're not charging any money, and review and rate on Apple, and tell your friends, send us feedback, send smoke signals, whatever. So, James, I'll take a seat and we can all listen to Christina Leigh's Thursday Night at the Opera, and I'll ask you to pay attention because it is a little bit subtle.
Hi there, I'm Leigh Redhead, a writer and member of Sisters in Crime Australia. Welcome to Scarlet Stiletto Bites, scintillating short stories by Australian women. Our weekly podcast is designed for busy lives. Each murder mystery is short, but not always sweet. Expect twisted tales, quirky humour, imagination, and a frisson of feminism. Sisters in Crime Australia's Scarlet Stiletto Awards were established in 1994 to unearth criminal literary talent. We're producing these podcasts of winning stories to celebrate the Sisters' 30th anniversary ceremony in Melbourne in late 2023. The concept designer and narrator is fellow sister, actor, barrister, broadcaster, and best-selling true crime author, Susanna Lobez.
Hello, Susanna here. We all feel cynical sometimes, don't we? Today on Scarlet Stiletto Bites, we meet a super cynic. She's seen everything. But her cynicism leads her to discover seriously sinister crimes. Thursday Night at the Opera by Christina Leigh, the Scarlet Stiletto winner in 1998. And there are a few dark themes in this story. Being the only left-handed black disabled lesbian in the New South Wales police force isn't nearly as fun as a lot of people seem to think. Well, at these people I work with now, just go right ahead and joke about it. The worst thing about my previous job was the way everyone used to go out of their way to make sure that I got the message that they were going out of their way to make sure I didn't feel stigmatised in any way. And I wasn't even disabled back then. No, okay, the worst thing about my previous job was how everyone went on and on about abused kids and nobody ever did anything about it. That's why I am where I am now. Okay, the paperwork is just as bad as it was in the Department of Community Services, but I do get to arrest the occasional villain, which is kind of nice. Of course, society is still to blame, and okay, I know the poor old perpetrators have tragic stories to tell. Abuse and broken homes and dyslexia and attention deficit disorder and bedwetting and glue sniffing and nose picking and dizzy spells. But the point is, and I think there is something of a tendency to overlook this in these interesting times, that these guys are choosing to deal with life's challenges by committing violent acts against small, defenceless children. And there comes a time in a girl's life when what she really wants to do is drag one of these guys down to the police station by his hair and get her not quite so disabled, estrogen challenged mates to belt the shit out of him. I sleep well at night. The main problem with the job is there's just a bit too much to do. I'm on every intersectoral committee and promotions review and special reporting group that comes our way, and there are days when I think that if the police force wants to give the impression to the wider community that it's full to the brim with hard-working, dedicated career women, then it should employ a few more of them and not work poor old Sergeant Rima Ruakuri to death. Well, it's not like I get time off from my normal duties or anything for all this bullshit. And I'll give you 3 guesses where I'm stationed. Lane Cove? Leafy, law-abiding Lane Cove? Nope. Galargambone? Nothing for 1,000,000 miles in any direction, but peace and quiet and DUIs? Nope again. King's Cross, maybe? Crime, grime, drugs and thugs. You got it. I guess the committee thought I'd blend right in here. Ruakuri, they probably said, the one that got shot in the leg, that black lizzo. Send her to King's Cross, no one's going to notice her there. Well, it's true. I do seem to blend right in. You have to be 9 feet tall with a couple of extra limbs to stand out from the crowd around here. But I kind of like it. The passing trade tend to be a bit of a pain, but the regular clients aren't that much different from what you'd find in community services, except that nobody expects you to turn them into the Brady Bunch. It's quite relaxing, actually. Senior Sergeant Donnelly takes the view that as long as we do our best to stop the street girls and the boys on the wall from getting themselves murdered, keep the dealers and junkies out of the main thoroughfares, and periodically round up anyone who looks under about 12 and doesn't seem to have a home to go to. That's about all anyone could realistically expect. I get to know some of the regular workers quite well, especially the parlour girls. They seem to last a bit longer than the street kids, but they're still in and out of the station often enough, and I've been known to get quite upset when one of them gets sliced up or makes an irrevocable error in her choice of pharmaceuticals. They're much friendlier now I'm a police person than they were when I worked for good old community services. I guess they know I have no intention of taking their babies away or trying to make them see that virtue is its own reward. So, could be worse. And here I am. It's a quiet Wednesday night. Well, as quiet as it ever gets around here, there's a 14-year-old called Chanel having the screaming Mimis in one of the cells. Something of a regular occurrence just lately. I make a note to explain to a couple of the managers that we are not a freak detox centre, and if they don't want us hanging around their clubs on a regular basis, checking on whether or not their staff are old enough to be legal, then they better exercise a bit more quality control in what they give them to stay happy. There's a mad woman at the counter demanding over and over again that we take her home to Daisy. There's a couple of drunks who've spewed up everything they ever ate in their entire lives and are wishing there was some way they could just be switched off until it was all over. And a couple of boys waiting for their dad to turn up with a lawyer. I'm also trying to draft a report for my latest committee. As the most junior member, and of course the only woman, I tend to be the one who gets to do the drafts. And a source of great joy it is too. This one is on snuff movies, and the party line is that it's all a load of bollocks. See, every time a young person goes missing, which happens about 8 times a week in the fair state of New South Wales, large numbers of concerned citizens are convinced that they've been abducted, raped and horribly murdered on video for the titillation of the perverted few. But Assistant Commissioner Hooper, the head of this committee that I'm on, he keeps saying that nobody on the committee has ever seen a snuff movie. Nobody has ever met anyone who is willing to say they've seen a snuff movie, and those people ought to know.
Thanks so much for listening. We'd love your feedback. Subscribe for free to Scarlet Stiletto Awards wherever you get podcasts. And do have our website, sistersincrime.org.au.
That was fantastic, wasn't it? I can't wait to listen to those podcasts. It's going to be my new go-to for my walks around the parks of Brunswick. So just to wrap up, as I was saying earlier, I really do encourage you all to submit a story to the Scarlet Stiletto Awards. A modest third prize win in 1998 gave me enough confidence to lash out and try for a full-length novel. And indeed, the character from that short story went on to be Jane Keeney, who was the expat detective in my first 3 novels. And then, as I mentioned earlier, because, me, it's all about me, I won the Scarlet Stiletto in 2011. And that was kind of fun because that was for a completely different thing. And I felt that, if I was going to try something really new, the Sisters in Crime was a perfect place to try it. So I have a red shoe trophy at home that I'm very proud of. And back then my daughter was 7 years old, and she confessed at one stage that she and her friend used to play a game with the trophy. They'd pretend it was a magic shoe, and she'd said, you put your foot in it and make a wish, and it takes you wherever you want to go. And that's so true. But that's exactly what the Scarlet Stiletto does. Not only that, my daughter went on to win the Youth Award a couple of years ago, the under 18s, when she was 15. And I'm hoping that all her literary wishes will come true. She's currently studying VCE at the Victorian College of the Arts Secondary School and aspiring to become an actor. Failed as a parent, but I believe it's an industry where her killer instinct may serve her well. So thank you to the sisters for all that you've done for the family.
Leigh! Her name's
Leigh and
Susanna. Like home.
We'll just all have my favourite very much. And so I'm hoping to have a good photo.
Yes, good photo.
Excuse us 1 minute.
Probably about this.
Oh yeah.
She's from below Carmel.
Oh, right.
No, that makes it look like
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. Jamil.
much, all of you, for coming tonight. Please give the readers and authors a big hand.